This video is going to be a basic outline of getting animated objects from Maya to Unreal Engine, using games as well as just using Unreal Engine as a renderer. It's going to cover just basic pipelines for skeletal mesh-based objects, which is for your characters or props that are going to be for gameplay elements, as well as Alembic caches that can be used for complex or just Maya-based rigs that do not work by default in the skeletal mesh workflow, as well as simulated objects that have to carry their animation through the mesh itself, such as like a cloth simulation. I won't go too deep into everything here, but you should get a general outline of all the good practices that will let you watch other videos and do your own research for more specific things required for your projects. Let's start with skeletal mesh assets. These are sort of your quintessential animated objects in a game, right? They're going to be your character assets, and they're going to essentially work by having a skeleton and then a mesh that it controls. And then that mesh is going to be able to animate with different animation assets. So the way it works in Unreal is you end up with a couple different types of assets. So this is one that is just in Unreal by default. It's in the default templates that you can check out. So I'm just in my third person game mode template. And you can see here, I'm in the skeletal mesh asset. So this one has the skeleton inside it, but it's also got the mesh component. So I've got my materials and stuff here as well. This is the thing you actually use, right? This kind of has all the data in it. Then you get a skeleton asset. This is obviously the skeleton itself. This is just how it's all controlled here. Then you have another one called a physics asset. These aren't necessary for them, but usually they come with them. And this is going to be things like your actual sort of collision boxes, right? And this is how you can have physics. So you can have like ragdoll effects as well. And then finally, you have animation assets, right? So I've got one here, but obviously you can see down the bottom, there's a whole bunch of different ones, right? So you can have this, but if I change to walk forward, it's a different animation asset here, just like so. And you can see that it showcases on that same skeletal mesh, right? So that's kind of what our end goal here is. This is what we want. Now, one thing before we start having a look at how to get this stuff from Maya is to just take a note of Unreal's axes system, right? Their world space. So down the bottom left here, I can see this little tiny thing. I'll probably zoom in. But you've got Y, Z, X, right? So it's a Z up and down inside of Unreal, as opposed to Maya, which is a Y up and down axis. Now, the trouble here is, yeah, it can be a little confusing. There is sort of automatic adjustments that Unreal makes for us when we import stuff. The biggest thing here is to just be aware of it and to be consistent. So even Unreal itself and Epic kind of have this weird thing where their character here, so this is a default character, faces down the Y axis. So it's a positive Y facing character. But forward in everything else in Unreal is treated as X forward, right? So it should be facing down this way. We even notice this if we just check out the third person character. So this is like the blueprint, the actual gameplay character. It actually faces, you can see down the bottom here, down the X. And if we have a quick look, it's kind of set up in a silly way where if you look at the mesh itself, they've actually just manually rotated it 270 degrees. And for some reason, this is like the kind of default way they want you to set things up. Again here, and we'll see this a bit later when we import, but the idea, the biggest thing we can think about is just to be consistent with your project. So when we export, when we import, whatever you're working on, as long as all your characters and how you've set them up are the same, that's way more important than trying to get too confused with this. Because yeah, I spend a bit of time trying to work out like the best workflows. It's never really that obvious. So as long as your things are consistent with your project, that's our end goal. That's what we want to see. So let's jump over real quick just to Maya to showcase that as well. I've just got that same character. I've just exported it out of Unreal just to show you what it looks like here, right? Clicking random things. And what we can see here is we have a skeleton underneath, and then we have the mesh as well. This is what Unreal wants for this. So this is also something we need to keep in mind. We only want one skeletal hierarchy. So you can't have like two skeletal hierarchies next to the same mesh. It has to be all under one. What that means is you just need at least like something at the top. So if you had like two different areas along this character, you still just need some sort of like root bone that we can have. So in this case, we have this, right? We have a root bone. If I shift open this, everything else is inside of here. So that's what it wants. And then it just wants a mesh next to it. You can have multiple meshes, but as long as it's just a mesh here. There's a lot of stuff that we'll see in a second that it's not going to read. It's only going to read this data here inside of the skeleton and then the mesh itself. So that's our end goal. So just to showcase that again, right? So this is just a default sort of Maya setup. Down the bottom left here, we have our axes, right? And you can see the Y is up by default and the Z is forward. So it's facing down positive Z. Again, this is something that we just need to be a little bit aware of. I don't think it's a huge deal to kind of work around it. You will notice this import, it actually automatically put like a -90 on my rotate X. It is possible, by the way, to set up Maya to be a Z up program. If you head down to this little animation man here, little orange fellow with a cog, that is a quick way to open your preferences. And in settings, you can change it to Z up. This is fine, right? And if you're using Unreal exclusively, you might want to change your Maya to this. But even this, by default, right, the Y is backwards. So like positive Y is different to Unreal as well. So it's not super consistent anyway. But if I just get rid of that -90, you can see like this is, oh, that didn't work so well. Must be just how it's set up. But I mean, you can see the skeleton works at least, right? So it's sort of like that is its default. You can set your stuff up to work like this. Again, personal preference. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day, as long as the end result in Unreal is consistent. So let's go have a look at a character now, and then we'll sort of see how to export this stuff out. All right, let's have a go at exporting out this character as a skeletal mesh, and then we'll put some of the animations that I've got in other files on it as well. So usually with a skeletal mesh export, you do want to kind of do it in a way where you export a default mesh. So just all the bones, everything that kind of is attached to it as a skeletal mesh, and then add the animation separately as different files. So we want to start by doing this first initial export here, right? So we want to take this character and make it our default skeletal mesh. Now, with skeletal meshes, it's very important to be aware of what actually gets transferred. Unreal is only going to read the mesh, so all of these parts here as well, and then the joints themselves, right? So if we have a look at some joints, I've just got mine turned off for a second here. The joints are going to be the thing that carries. The animation data is only going to transfer through the bones themselves, so these guys here, and that's because bones are sort of tied to the world space a lot of the time, right? So they're just 100% from each thing to another. They don't have the ability to be like frozen on their transforms. They're just in relation to their hierarchy. So that's why they work so well for game animation. The only other thing that can get carried through is blend shapes. So I do have a couple blend shapes on this character where I've got the eyes here, and I can kind of change the shape of them with a blend shape. So I've got this like square eye I can do and this arc eye to give it kind of this emotion here. Any other kind of deformation will not get carried through. So if you're using any sort of like deformers for your mesh, so any of this stuff here, if it's not then kind of converted to like a blend shape or a morph shape or morph target, I think they call them in Unreal, it will not work. So really be careful about kind of the limitations of this. If you're having a more complex Maya rig, you're going to have to use an Alembic cache export, and you won't really be able to use it for like a game character. So I'll show you that later in the video, but just for now, be aware your game characters, it's only going to be the actual skeleton and its paint weights, of course, right? So the actual movement, like if I move this thing, obviously the bones are tied to the mesh, so that data gets carried through, and then any blend shapes are going to get carried through. But that's it. So in that case, what we need in this initial export is only the mesh and only the bones. All these controls and stuff, obviously they're just for me to animate this character while it's inside of Maya. None of that gets carried through. So it's only going to be this stuff here. Now my hierarchy isn't the most amazing for this character, but it's kind of fine, kind of just for showcase purposes here anyway. It's also a sort of Maya setup character. So it is Z facing, right? And I've got my X and my Y up and down. So this will be a good example of kind of how to show how to be consistent, even if your characters aren't set up perfectly for your scene. Again, in Unreal, it's about that import, making sure it's correct. And I do know there's going to be a little hitch, but it'll be a good showcase. So what we want to do is grab essentially our bones and our mesh. So best way to do this is just try to grab just those parts, right? So if I grab all my skeletal meshes, well, sorry, just the meshes here as well. And then if I just go to joints here and I can go select at the top and go hierarchy, that'll just grab everything down that line as well. So if I open up this joints, just so you can see, it grabs everything. Obviously there's constraints on these as well, just from my rig setup, but they're not going to really get carried through anyway. For the export itself, I really recommend getting used to using the game exporter. So file game exporter. And this initial export is just going to be the mesh, right? So it doesn't need to be any animation parts themselves. So I'm just going to drag this out so you guys can see it better. I am going to change this to export selection. So just at the top here, all of these settings are usually pretty good for your default export. That's why it's quite nice to use. Inside of settings, all of this is also pretty good. Unticked animation, if you have animation in your scene, I really don't recommend it on this initial export of the basic skeletal mesh. Move to origin is only going to be relevant if your character is away from the center of the world. In my case, it's not, which usually your characters shouldn't be like that if they're game characters, so that's good as well. And then our path is the last thing. So I'm just going to make a new path just on the desktop here. We'll call it animation Unreal video. And then I'll choose just here and I'll call this one SK underscore demo scale character, right? So whatever you want to call it, make sure you hit enter here just so it sets it in the name. After that, you're pretty good. So as long as it's model, export selection, and then yeah, no animation, all of this should be pretty good. Go for a export here. That should send out everything and export successful. Cool. Let's jump quickly into Unreal and then import it, and then we'll look at getting a animation out of here as well. So in Unreal, I'm just going to quickly make a new folder and I'll just call demo scale character again. And we're just going to import it straight into here. So I'm going to go import and I'll find it on my desktop and I'll find that thing right here. Then I'm going to go for sk underscore demo skeleton character. I'm going to open this up. Now, because it had bones and it had mesh, it should pick it up as a default import skeletal mesh, which it has. So it's nice. You just want to check here. Pretty much just always check this top thing to see what it's doing. So import skeletal mesh is correct. Skeletal mesh, import mesh, perfect. The skeleton here, it's important that this is none if this is a new skeletal mesh. If you're choosing something that already exists, it's going to try just put that new mesh onto that existing skeleton. So good that this is none. All of these other things are pretty good. Other ones that are important is, yeah, this convert scene should do a pretty good job of trying to convert it from that Y up scene, right? That's the whole idea. If you need to change anything, import rotation here can sometimes be useful, right? If it comes in and it's rotated funny, if you fix it here in the import, it's kind of set inside of Unreal. All of this advanced stuff is also, yeah, usually pretty fine. There's some things in here, sometimes you can change. If you want to, there's sometimes these ones about sort of default poses. It's kind of okay. We'll get some warnings, but usually they're fine. Materials as well, don't need to cover them in this video. Cool, I'm just gonna go import here. And yeah, you can see I get these kind of errors here. As long as they're not big red ones, most of the time these are okay, right? You'll get some warnings. Different ways of importing are going to have different warnings like this stuff here. It's usually nothing too bad as long as your end result is okay, right? That's all you should really look at. So it's got some default materials that I have here, which is fine. You know, obviously that's a different video for that kind of stuff. All we should really be looking at here is we got those three assets we looked at before. A skeletal mesh, the pink one, a physics asset, and the skeleton itself. So just check by opening up your skeletal mesh that it is in the scene. Now, one thing that we actually didn't do here is our morph targets didn't come through. So these are my ability to kind of have those blend shapes. And that is one of the settings that is kind of missing here. Just because it's good to know, right? If there is any errors on your import, pretty much always with Unreal, you can kind of re-import the mesh by just changing the import settings. So the import settings are usually just hidden down the bottom here. If you know what you're looking for, you can usually find them. So if I just search for morph, we can actually find that there's import settings and then import morph targets. So if I tick that and then just go up to re-import base mesh, if you don't see them popping up straight away, you just have to reopen the skeletal mesh here. And same with any of this like re-import stuff. It just seems to be a thing. If you just kind of close that again and just open up that skeletal mesh component, you should now see that the update has actually worked, which is kind of fun. So now you can see here skeleton tree, and then I've got my morph target. So then that stuff that we had a quick look at, you can see I can actually kind of preview it here as well. And that means any animation that utilizes these will actually have it. So same with any rotations you need to do, you can kind of change them inside here and just re-import if you need to. Sweet. So now that we've got that, we can just have a quick look. Yeah, so we've got our skeleton itself. So that's got all our joint hierarchy here, which is nice. It will have done rotation to this initial point here to make sure that it is facing the correct direction. It is facing down that Y-axis, which is kind of fine, right? Like I said, as long as you're consistent with your imports, that is all good. And then finally, you have your physics asset, which has some default sort of hitboxes on here. Not important to kind of go through this for this video, but it's good to know that it's here and it works how we want it to. Next up, we want to actually animate our skeletal mesh. So we want to start importing the animations, because what we have here is just sort of something that can take animations, but it doesn't animate right yet, right? So we want new assets here. So I'm going to jump over to Maya, and this is just a file I have of an animation that I want to kind of have for my character here. So I want to import this. Pretty much it's the same way we exported our static part. We're just going to go to Game Exporter again inside of here, and we're going to go to Animation Clips. And we're just going to add it here. So instead of model this time, animation clips is just going to carry the animation data, which is kind of nice. Again, export selection. And what we want to do is just make sure we grab that exact same sort of selection we had. So you can just grab the joints, right? So I've seen some people kind of talk about this, and that's fine. And it will pick up just the animation. The downside is if you do have any of your blend shapes or your morph targets, so my eyes, I don't think there's actually any animation in this, but if there is data in that, it will not get carried through. So you have to make sure you grab both of them. I kind of recommend that most of the time. And then it's just about ticking the right things on our import. So again, let's do that same thing. So I'm going to go for a select and hierarchy here, and then I'm just going to grab all my meshes. So same sort of selection. You can set up like object sets for this stuff. It's pretty good. If you're using a referenced mesh as well from your rig as well, completely fine. Just the same idea here. We just want to grab the right stuff. Perfect. So in animation clips, the way this works is, yeah, export selection is fine. You actually just need to go animation clips here and just hit plus, and then you give it a name. So this would probably be my run cycle. And then I can go enter. The start and end is completely fine. You do want your animations to be actually looped here. So have like the start and the end frame be exactly the same, just because Unreal is going to read it not sampled at the same frames per second, right? A game can run faster than 24 frames a second, things like that. So you do just want to make sure that they are the same. All of this stuff should be good by default. Bake animation is completely fine. Input connections will be off by default. That's fine as long as you select your entire hierarchy here as well. Cool. The last little prefixing here, that is just so you can add something to the front of it. So I like to maybe sometimes do like anim underscore, and that means whatever you have as an animation clip here is going to be a separate thing, right? So it's anim underscore run cycle at the top. You can obviously have different ones. So if you have multiple animations in one file, you can kind of split them out here as well. And my path, I've just put it in that same spot. So this should be pretty good. Let's go for an export, right? Cool. That sent that up. Let's jump into Unreal and import that one in. Now, this is where things are going to look a little bit interesting. But if I go import again, same idea, animation. So this is where I need to stop for a second. If it was just a skeleton that I had selected here, it will pick this up as just an animation. But because I have the mesh selected, because I want to make sure I carry my morph target data through as well, if I have it, I do want to just untick import mesh. So it'll still pick it up as a skeletal mesh because there's bones in there, but just untick import mesh. And again, just check this, right? If it just says import animation, you've done the correct thing. This is important. We want to make sure the skeleton is the correct skeleton. So SK demo skeleton character, that's the one I imported. So that is correct. That's the right one. All of these settings should be pretty self-explanatory, but you've got exported time. You know, you can change it to frame specific and things like that. All should be pretty good here. I don't think it's going to have a problem. I will need to change this import rotation, but I want to show you what happens first. And we should see, right? So again, some errors, just warnings, so it should be fine. Just have a kind of quick look. What I'll find, and I kind of expect this to happen, it has rotated. It's kind of funny. Now, depending on how you have your Maya set up and how you have it rotated, also down to like how your hierarchy is set up. So like, I'm pretty sure the thing that screws up mine is just like there's some funny grouping here that it doesn't really like, and it does this annoying thing where it rotates it here. Like I said, though, you're going to have these issues. Like, honestly, they just kind of come up a lot, I find. And depending on how you sort of set up your rigs and what you're comfortable with, it's better to just kind of set them up nicely so they work for you, and then just be consistent on the imports. So I just know essentially that if I go here with my animation on the import rotation, I need just 90 here. So if I just go that and go re-import animation, that will just rotate it up to be the correct style. So I just got to remember that going forward, that all my rotations for this character is 90. And if the rest of my characters are rigged the same way and they come through, it's kind of fine, right? As long as you're consistent with this. You will just find, yeah, it comes up occasionally. We're going to see it again in the Alembics. It does the same sort of thing here. So now we have that. We kind of have everything we need, right? Like we've got all our assets here. We have the mesh itself, and then our little physics asset, our skeleton, and now any animation here. Obviously, how you utilize these inside of your game, that's completely another video that needs to be kind of done. But there's plenty of stuff out there that you can have a look of how to like trigger these and kind of blend between them, all that kind of good stuff. Let me just quickly import another one just so you can kind of see that process. So I've just got another little walk cycle here. Again, make sure I got my whole hierarchy selected, all my meshes, game exporter, animation clips, export selected, perfect, and just go export again. And then we'll just bring that into Unreal the exact same way. So inside of here, grab that walk cycle. So this time I kind of know that I'm going to need this by default, the rotation. So this is just that idea of being consistent, right? Untick import mesh, or I might have just reset that there for me because I had to untick it first, but this will save like going forward as well. So if I did have a lot of animations, like this will save my settings, which is kind of nice. All of that should be pretty good. And then just go import here, right? Again, warnings, but that's fine. And then walk cycle is now here, which is cool, right? And the cool thing is you're going to start seeing them build up over here in the bottom right. You can change between these animations, the ones that are on now my skeletal mesh. Really cool stuff. From here, it's up to using them, right? So checking out animation blueprints, all that kind of good stuff that you'll have to have a look at yourself. Just to round out this skeletal mesh section, I just want to show you one other variation of your skeletal mesh sort of assets, and that's using just sort of mesh hierarchies instead. So what we looked at before with just the character, obviously there was the bones in there, and we have the paint weights, we have like a bind skin, it's all kind of connected, but you can still have animation on just sort of meshes themselves. You're just going to have to treat it the same way as you just set up your mesh like it is a bone, right? So any part that moves independently on a mesh just has to be its own mesh part, of course, and then sit inside the one hierarchy. So it still wants that sort of general sort of skeleton hierarchy. You just can have it be without bones themselves, right? And then Unreal will pick those up as bones. So I've got a little terminal here, just down here in my outliner, and I've just got base terminal. That's sort of my core piece. So imagine that's like my root bone. And then I have this keyboard base. I have all the buttons as little separate pieces. And then I also have this little, it's like a battery squeezer, I call it, just for this design thing here. But that also is a movable part. And then what I've got is just some simple rig. And all this is just controllers. And then they're just tied with constraints to the objects. Now it's important here that these, I would never really animate just your default actual, what do you call this? Sorry, the mesh itself. And the main reason for that is the mesh should keep its orientation here, like its actual translates on the object to make it easier for the bone locations. Inside of Unreal, you might want to do some code where you find the location of the bones for these model parts to spawn something in. So it's best if they actually hold that data. So you actually see all of these kind of have this tied data here from the constraint of where it's actually sitting, as opposed to just being like zeroed out. And that way, what you should do instead is then on your controls, that's where the 0 actually is, right? So if I push this controller down, if I zero this out, that's its default position. So having it tied to the part there is a lot better, right? The actual control. And then leaving these to have their proper sort of world space or hierarchy-based translates and transforms are going to be a lot more effective. So let's just have a look at exporting this out. It's going to be the same sort of functionality where we want sort of like a default pose of this, and then we can have the animations kind of come out afterwards instead. So let's kind of grab it all. Same idea. We want to make sure we grab the sort of entire stack here. So you might just want to go for a select and then a hierarchy. So now I've got all the mesh. Again, I don't need the controls. They're not something that Maya is going to read. It is, sorry, Unreal is going to read. It's only going to read that location of the bones, which in this case is going to be the actual mesh. And do be aware, right, these meshes are getting moved by these, right? So if we take a look at that, like translate Y157, if I move this here, it's actually going to kind of change, right? So now it's 142, down here 127, right? So it's actually moving it. It's important that it does, and it's not just like sitting inside a group and having like 0 data the whole way. Unreal won't read that very well, right? You have to treat it like they're bones. So this sort of setup is kind of nice, where have the models in a hierarchy and then have them connected to just controllers. So again, I'll do that same thing. Select, and we'll go for hierarchy here, just to grab everything. And we'll just go for that same kind of export. So game exporter again, we'll go for a model first, right? And that's the whole idea. We do want to make sure we don't have any animation. Export selection is great. I'll just need to choose that section again here. So like so, SK and terminal. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of correct, right? Skeletal mesh, terminal. I'll just do demo after it, so I know it's a demo one. Everything else should be pretty good, right? Do not click animation here. I actually have the animation in this file. So this is a good example of that as well. Same with our character. I want to not take the animation out first, right? I want it to sit as a separate folder. You can, but it's just like a lot of the time it's best to just kind of have them separate. So just like that should be good. Let's go for an export. And let's do the animation while we're here as well. So animation clips. This can be a cool example here of even like separating out the animation, right? So this first section here, I've got like a little keyboard demo. So probably up to like frame 60 would be like keyboard. And then that's going to be, yeah, frame 1 to 60. And then after that, I have the little demo here of the outside, right? And that's just the, well, these little bones on this side. This could be an interesting one where like sometimes you can actually just take the bones you want to animate. So if I sort of unticked these bits, they would kind of come out, but that's kind of fine as well. So then from here, we'll just do another one. So you just add plus, and then I'll just call this like battery squeeze. Makes more sense if you know anything about it, but that's fine. And I kind of know what it is. So it just pulls down this bit here. And then that would be from 60 to the end, right? So 60 to 120, that's kind of fine. I think it happens, well, it happens pretty damn quick. So we could even do like 60 to 85. But sometimes this is useful, like to split these out into separate pieces. Doesn't really matter though, but it depends on what you need it to do, right? If you need the character to press multiple times for different animations, this is the benefit. And this is what's nice about this sort of thing. It's for your props, things in the environment, right? If you have like something that dispenses health, right? It might have a couple different types of animations that get triggered at different times. And that's what's nice about having this sort of setup, as opposed to just like one animation tied to it, or using like code to animate it as well. You can bring a lot more character into it like this. So same idea. I'll just do an anim underscore for my regular setup, and we'll just change where this goes to my demo folder here. Cool. Sweet. Everything should be good. All of this should be ready to go. Yep. And we'll just go export here as well, right? Always take it back to frame 1, actually. That's a good idea. Looks good. So let's import these and see how they look. So again, we'll just jump back into here. We'll just go back, make a new folder. And inside of here, we'll start with the skeleton. So we're going to go to SK skeleton demo. Now, this is an interesting one, right? So if you are doing this sort of mesh-based skeletal mesh, it will pick it up as a static mesh, right? Because it doesn't have any animation. It's a model itself. So it just thinks it's just models, right? So you do have to manually tick skeletal mesh here, right? I'm going to get rid of that rotation because that was just from before I had that sort of setup. But skeletal mesh, again, make sure I don't choose a skeleton for this default one. Import animations, I want to untick this, right? Even so there's nothing in the folder, but we should just make sure it's not there. Looks pretty good. So let's go for an import again. Again, should be fine. Let's not worry too much about that. We now have it here. So we have our skeletal mesh, and you can see that it's sitting here. Our skeleton tree is all here. They all kind of should work. You can even like demo these parts here to make sure they kind of work. You will notice that the skeletons are in the correct place, and that's because the data was kind of stored there as well. So then we just have to import our animations. So you can even do these both at the same time, right? So I have my keyboard and my battery squeeze. So you notice they did come out as separate animations because that's how we set them up. So if I go open here, this time we're going to make sure, again, it's not skeletal mesh. We want just animation. So untick import mesh. Choose the right skeleton, which it is, kind of finds it most of the time. I do not want any rotation on this. I think this one works fine without it just because the setup is nicer, right? It's a little cleaner. There's less groups, so it should be fine this time. And that should all be pretty good. So let's just go for an import. And same here. I could have gone import all, but we'll just do the same thing. Should be kind of fine. And now if we have a look at these, you can just see that, yeah, they're animations. And you can see down the bottom right, in my asset browser, you can just change between each one of these. And now there's a separate animation. So this is very powerful for things like props, right? If you're going to need to trigger different types of animations for a prop, imagine like a chest where it's like an unlock sequence and then you have to press something again to then open it, right? So having them be separate pieces is really nice. Also means, yeah, your different, where your physics asset here can have different hitboxes for the meshes, right? And it's a great way to deal with that. You can get locations in Blueprint and code quite easily. So very effective way to kind of deal with your animatable objects. Awesome. Now let's have a look at another type of importing animation into Unreal, and that's going to be sort of geometry caches, right? So geometry caches are going to store like everything that happens to a model. It pretty much is just like a way it like bakes it in. Now, usually these are not so great for gameplay stuff, right? If it's like a character, you never really want to use like a geometry cache because the limitations are kind of huge, right? You can't blend them very easily in the engine. They're a little bit heavier a lot of the time as well. So skeletal meshes are the best for like most gameplay things. Where like a geometry cache comes in is if you want to have some sort of like simulation in your game, right? Like a sort of pre-baked simulation. So maybe I have like a flag animated, or this could be anything, right? Like some kind of crazy cushion thing, you like jump down onto it and it plays like a very specific type of simulation on that thing. Other areas you might want to use this is like if you're using any deformers inside of Maya, so like any of these like non-linear ones, like you have bends and stuff. If that's the kind of look you're going for and you really want it to just be like a one-off scene in your game, geometry cache is the way to go. The other use for it is, yeah, if you're just animating inside of Maya and you want to use Unreal as a renderer, which is completely fine. It's a very good renderer. It's a lot faster than something like Arnold that we have in here. It's a real-time renderer. So we can use it for stuff like this, but then also like really complex characters that have a lot of like Maya-based rigging. They can just be kind of transferred to Unreal with a cache. So how do we do it, right? Let's use this as a simple example, but obviously you have to think about other ways you can do it. So I've just got this kind of like simulation I did just with Encloth inside of Maya, and I want to take that to Unreal. So how we do it is we select the object we want, right? I probably should rename it, but P-Play is fine. That's all good. We go up to cache, and that's usually at the top next to Arnold, right? Depending on what set you're on, but it's on most of them. So modeling, cache. We're going to use Alembic cache. These are the best ones for it. And then we're just going to go for a export selection to Alembic. We're going to hit this little box here and get the settings. Now the settings here, kind of up to you what you want. I think, let me just go reset settings so they're by default. This step is like how much it is going to sample. So I feel like I probably don't need it to sample as much. So it'll be a quicker export if I just change it to 3. But usually you want it to be on 1 just because it's going to give you like the full result. So if there's an animated character, you might want to leave it at 1. I'm going to go for 3. That's fine. Time slider is good. My whole animation does occur over these 800 frames in my case. Everything else that we need is down the bottom. So you just scroll down. Most of this stuff should be pretty fine. But if you scroll right down to the bottom, there's a few advanced options. Now, these are pretty important for mainly your textures more than anything. So textures especially require this UV right. If you have proper UVs for your object, in my case, I actually don't. I don't really care. But for the most part, you always want to do this. UV right is going to actually keep the UVs of your object. Face sets is also a part of this. Essentially, it's just to do with the materials. So getting the materials to show up is also a big part of this. So you want to make sure that you write the face sets. Again, not important for this one, but we'll show you in a sec how important that is. And then world space is another one that sometimes is worth ticking, right? And this is just to get like a more accurate result inside of Unreal. Sometimes like hierarchies, if you've set this up, especially with those other kind of rigs, right? Like a complex Maya rig, world space is usually going to give you a better result. So they're the kind of main 3. The other one would be UV sets if that is relevant for you. But yeah, I'm going to leave that off. So these are the 3 main ones. Cool. Then you just want to go for an apply. It'll ask you to save it somewhere. So again, I'll choose my export here. We'll call this one flag, weird capitals, flag cache, and it'll just play through and export that out for me, right? So it happened pretty quick there because I did the 3-step. It just means it skips every like second and third frame, right? And it just goes to the next one. It's going to give me a less good result, but it will let me speed it up inside of Unreal. Cool. So that's fine. That's done. So let's have a look at importing that. So it's pretty simple, right? Let's go just into here, and I'll just go back to content, and we'll just go for a new folder again, and I'll call this one caches. And inside here, go for an import. Look for it. It's going to be an ABC file, Alembic cache file, right? Notice they are quite large, right? And this depends on like what it is, but they're usually just more intense than your regular FBX exports because of this. So that's why you want to avoid them for most things, right? Flag cache, let's open that up. It should pop up to an Alembic cache import options. If it's made out of multiple meshes, you'll see each kind of part at the top here. Mine only has this output cloth, which is good. That's just the name of the thing. The import type, we do want geometry cache, and that's going to actually bring the animation. Obviously, static mesh won't do anything, right? It'll just be a static mesh. So geometry cache. The sampling stuff here, frame start and end, is also going to be dependent on stuff. It's 266 for me because of that frame skipping stuff I did, right? So it's actually only 0 to 266 because it's skipping all those frames. It's not the full 800. The only other one that sometimes is relevant is here, which is your flattened tracks, and that can be to do with your materials. What you'll find is if you're not seeing all your materials, you might have to untick this. If you are, it's kind of fine. Play it by ear and sort of see once we get there. It'll be more relevant, I'll show you on the character in a second. The last bit here is just your conversion, right? And this, I don't really understand why or who set this up, but maybe I'm missing something. But this preset here of Autodesk Maya is not correct. So if we pull this in by default, it'll be facing the wrong direction. You essentially need a rotation here, similar to how we set up before. But if you want, 3ds Max seems to work, which is kind of dumb, but it's just this 90 here. So you notice the only difference is just that 90. So you can either just change this to 90 or change that max one. It will change it to custom settings. Who knows why, but that's just what it is, right? So you usually just need rotation of 90, and then it will be accurate to how it was rotated inside of Maya. Cool. If I go for an import, that should be it. It'll take a little bit here. Sweet, and it's done. And if we just have a look, it is a geometry cache. Now you won't actually get to see it inside of here, right? Not like an animation, so it's kind of all stored like so. So easiest way to kind of see this is actually to just find your level and just chuck it in, right? So if I just go for a cache, drag one of these guys in, there it is. It's only one-sided because of the material. And to get it to play, you just need to play the game, right? So if I just go here, play the game, you should now see my flag is animating, right? Which is cool. Other ways to do it is just to change this at the top to simulating. So if you just go 3 little dots here, you go simulate, that'll just kind of play it in the game as well. And you can kind of see how it looks. And you can change a bunch of stuff here with like playback speed and start time offset, a whole bunch of cool stuff if you want to as well. The only other thing that you might want is you can change the material of this. Now this can be done either in the thing that's in the world just down here, or you can find that in geometry cache inside of materials. So if you do have separate materials on that model itself, they will show up as different array elements. It can sometimes be annoying to get to be the exact material you want. There's some videos out there, if you just have a look for materials and Alembic caches, that'll show you like how to get it to work automatically. It's not as easy as you'd want. So usually it's just drag and drop until you kind of find which one is which. That's kind of the best way to do it. Unless you've got a really complex thing with heaps of materials, then maybe look at those better kind of processes. Awesome. So last use case for Alembic caches, and the last sort of thing about animation that I'm going to cover here is if you've got a sort of like Maya specific rig. So this is a Max rig. It's old as hell, right? But it was, rigged almost 20 years ago, probably even more. I don't even know. Way old. It uses a bunch of stuff in here where there's a lot of like group hierarchies you can see inside of this. If I just open it up, right? Lots of random group stuff. There's some Maya specific things in here. Like there's actual just like vertex clusters and stuff. Pretty much what you'll find is if I try to set this up as a skeletal mesh export and I put it into Unreal, Unreal will be like, no thanks. It just won't read it, right? There'll be lots of errors. you have varying levels of these errors. If you have these sort of Maya specific stuff where just like maybe we'll only do half your animation, some things won't get carried through, not so good, right? So yeah, making game characters, set them up properly for the game. So just keep it that skeletal mesh with some just one skeletal hierarchy with a mesh is the best way to go. But if you have these characters, right, that you're animating and you just want to use Unreal as a renderer, you can still get it out with Alembics. So same idea here if you just want the mesh itself, and that's what you want to use to actually send this stuff out, right? So I might just have, let me just change this down to something like 100, just so we can kind of get just this animation out here instead. So we just want to kind of cache this animation so that it can be placed into Maya. So it's for like an animated short or something like that. Sweet. So if we just go for the same exact kind of workflow, Alembic cache, export selection to Alembic, make sure our settings are the same here. So 1 would be correct this time. I do want it to kind of be actually like that. And then same sort of settings here. So UV right, base sets, world space should be pretty damn good. And just go for an export. Give it a nice name and put it in the right place. So we'll call it Max Walk Alembic. And we should get it kind of cached out for us. So then we just jump back into Unreal, do the exact same thing as before, import, look for our Max Walk. Where is he? Here he is. Same thing, geometry cache, flatten tracks. Yeah, you'll find if you've got multiple materials, I've only got the one, so it's not the end of the world here. And that should kind of come through. Rotation here needed again, just make sure that is correct. Looks pretty good, right? So let's go for an import. Cool. There he is. If I chuck him into the scene and just hit simulate, he should now walk how I expect him to. So really nice way of just like getting your animations into Unreal. Same sort of idea. If you have your materials, you would set them up, export your textures, put them in here. That should kind of work fine. Just how you would, I've got videos if you want to have a look on my channel of just importing your materials with textures out of Substance and stuff like that. And then you'll just have to put that material in here for it to work. Should work pretty well. Just to fully finish off this video, right? One thing that just you might want to know about geometry caches or even just using your skeletal meshes as well is if you are using Unreal just as like a cinematic tool or like an animation rendering software, you'll obviously be using the sequencer. Again, not to get too far into it, but if I just like added one here, so you just go add new sequencer, you could call it whatever you want, spawn that in, and now you essentially have like a timeline track, right? So if you have animations that you want to put in here, so our Max Walk Alembic, we drag that in. For Alembic caches, it works like this, right? It's going to place it into the scene. You can, again, move that around. But if you've cached this from a very specific scene with its location data, that 0 data will be perfect. And you can always zero that back out just in the location down here if you want to, right? So you can just go back there. So if we want him to play right now, because he actually doesn't, we just have to add the geometry cache component. It's a little bit annoying, like the setup like this. But you just go to the component here, add geometry cache component, and then in that cache component, add again, and you just want geometry cache, right? And then that will play your exact thing like so, right? So that'll just play your animation. You can have it set up with those complex Maya rigs as well. Just to show you the alternative, right, of if we had like our running character, so this guy here, so our SK demo character, so we spawn him in instead. And again, we'll kind of maybe place him off to the side. But if we wanted an animation to play for him, he works a little bit differently where you've got an animation thing by default, and then you just choose an animation here. So again, there's benefits for this as well, which is kind of nice. Alembics, just think of them as like very set in baked animation, whereas this is, yeah, you can just like choose different animations. So now you can see he runs there, and I can just increase that so it cycles. And then I could even just like add a new one here for the walk cycle underneath. And the cool thing with these is you can like blend them out as well. So if you have a look at the animation, there's like weight. So you can set keyframes and stuff. So if I just, let's do that real quick, right? Just for the fun of it. If we do a keyframe here of the top one, and then that goes down to 0 here. And then we'll do the opposite of this guy is, well, it should just kind of work because it's blending out over the top. So now you can see when I hit play, he slows down at the end there, just automatically. We're just kind of cruising. Awesome. that's going to wrap everything up. Utilizing these and sort of how you actually need them to show up in your scene is kind of going to be up to you and working that stuff out. It's always going to be project dependent, so I can't help you too much with it all, but hopefully this video gave you a good overview of how you can approach getting your animated objects into your scenes and then how you can actually use those and what the best use cases are. Awesome.